happens when civilization ends. Not in the history books or Vault-Tec propaganda, but in the streets where mothers trampled, their own children trying to reach shelter that didn't exist. This is the confession of someone who survived when 8 million didn't, who witnessed humans transform into raiders, ghouls, and monsters, not from radiation, but from the choices we made when the world burned. And if you think you'd be different, that you'd be noble when the fallout comes, then you need to hear what we really became in those subway tunnels as the radiation counters screamed and the dying started eating the dead. You want to know what really happened when the bombs fell, not the sanitized Vault-Tec propaganda they fed us before. Not the heroic tales the Brotherhood scribes write down, the truth, the ugly, choking truth that nobody wants to remember. I was there, October 23rd, 2077, Boston, 9:42 a.m. I know you've heard the date before, but you haven't heard what it was like to live through it, to be one of the ordinary people. Not a soldier, not a scientist, just someone trying to get their morning coffee when the world decided to commit suicide. The siren started as a low wail, almost musical at first. You know that sound when wind catches a broken window just right? That's how it began. Then it grew and grew, until it was this mechanical scream that made your teeth ache and your chest tighten. The emergency broadcast system had tested so many times before, every first Tuesday of the month, that for about 3 seconds, everyone just stood there, frozen, waiting for the "this is only a test" message. It never came. I was in Scollay Station, the old subway terminal, buying a newspaper. Can you imagine? Still buying newspapers in 2077. The vendor, this old ghoul named Marcus, though he wasn't a ghoul yet, of course, he dropped the stack of papers he was holding. They scattered across the platform like dead birds. The headline read something about tensions with China. Ironic. Then someone screamed, "It's real! Christ Almighty, it's real!" And that's when the human avalanche began. You need to understand something about panic. Real panic. It's not like in the movies where people run in neat lines. It's liquid. It's crushing. Bodies become a river of flesh and fear, and you either flow with it or get pulled under. A woman next to me, young, maybe 25, wearing this yellow dress with daisies on it, she went down. Just disappeared under the stampede. I reached for her hand, but the crowd carried me away. I can still see those daisies sometimes when I close my eyes. Bright yellow against the concrete, then red, then gone. The subway tunnels were supposed to be safe. That's what the civil defense films told us. Duck and cover, they said. Get underground, they said. But they never mentioned what happens when 10,000 people try to fit into a space meant for 500. The gates buckled. The turnstiles snapped like wishbones. I saw a father lift his daughter over his head, trying to keep her above the crowd, his face purple from the pressure of bodies crushing his ribs. The girl was crying for her mother, but her mother was somewhere behind us, probably already trampled, probably already dead. Marcus, the newspaper vendor, he knew these tunnels, grabbed my arm with his ink-stained fingers and pulled me toward a maintenance door. "Not that way," he wheezed. "Everyone's going to the main platform. We go to the service tunnels." We weren't the only ones with that idea. Maybe 30 of us squeezed into that narrow corridor. The walls were sweating, condensation from all the panicked breathing. The lights flickered. Someone was praying in Spanish. Someone else was calling names into their phone. "Jennifer? Jennifer, can you hear me?" But the networks were already dead. All of them. Just static and silence. Then came the flash. Even underground, even through tons of concrete and earth, that light found us. It came through the ventilation grates like the finger of God, if God's finger was made of pure, burning white. It lit up the tunnel brighter than noon. The woman next to me, she'd been covering her infant son with her coat. She looked down at him, and I saw his shadow burned into the fabric. Just for a second. A little dark outline against the material before the light faded. The heat came. Next. A wave of it. like opening an oven door if the oven was the size of the world. The air itself seemed to recoil. My lungs felt like I was breathing sand. The metal pipes along the ceiling started to groan and expand. Pop, pop, pop. Like popcorn made of iron. And then, the shake. Have you ever been in an earthquake? This wasn't like that. An earthquake moves the ground. This moved everything. The air, the walls, the thoughts in your head. The concrete ceiling started raining dust, then chunks. A steam pipe burst somewhere deeper in the tunnel. The scream of superheated vapor mixing with human screams until you couldn't tell them apart. Marcus pulled me deeper into the maintenance tunnels. We passed a utility room where 3 Vault-Tec employees were huddled around a radio. Clean blue and yellow jumpsuits. They'd known. God damn them, they'd known this was coming. One of them looked at me and I saw it in his eyes. The guilt. They'd had warning. Minutes, maybe hours. And they'd saved themselves. Is there a vault? I gasped. Is there a vault entrance down here? The Vault-Tec employee, barely more than a kid. He shook his head. Vault 111 is in Sanctuary Hills. Vault 81 is west. Nothing downtown. We were just doing maintenance schedules. A lie. I knew it then, and I know it now. But what did it matter? The vaults were sealed. Had been for minutes already, probably. While we were still buying newspapers and coffee, those heavy doors were already grinding shut, locking in the eligible families. The ones who'd won the lottery, they called it. The ones Vault-Tec had selected for their experiments. Though we didn't know that part yet. The tunnels kept shaking, not from more bombs, that would come later, but from the buildings above us, dying. You could hear them through the earth. These deep bass groans as skyscrapers twisted and fell. The Corvega assembly plant, the mass fusion building, Faneuil Hall. Centuries of history and progress becoming rubble in seconds. Each collapse sent vibrations through the ground that made your bones ache. We found a wider maintenance chamber, some kind of water processing station from before the war. Maybe 50 of us had made it that deep. 50 souls out of thousands who'd fled into the subway. The rest were either crushed in the stampede, burned by the initial flash that made it through the grates, or buried when the first sections of tunnel collapsed. That's when the real waiting began. The real horror wasn't the bombs, you see. It was what came after. A man in a business suit, his tie still perfectly knotted despite everything. He had a Radiation King portable radio, military frequency. The voices coming through were clipped, professional, terrified. Boston confirming ground burst. Repeat, ground burst confirmed. New York is gone. Repeat, New York is static. Philadelphia impact in T-. Static. NORAD is not responding. Cheyenne Mountain is not static. Each burst of static meant another city dying. Another million people becoming shadows on walls or puddles of radioactive meat. The businessman kept adjusting the dial, searching for voices, for hope, for anything. But one by one, the stations went quiet. America was being erased in real time, frequency by frequency. A woman was cradling her son, maybe 8 years old. He kept asking when they could go home. She kept telling him, "Soon, baby, soon." But her eyes were looking at the ceiling, at the dust still filtering down, and we all knew there was no home to go back to. That boy would grow up never knowing what a tree looked like before the radiation, never tasting water that didn't have that metallic sting, never seeing a sky that wasn't the color of old blood. The temperature in the tunnel started to rise, not from the bombs anymore, but from the fires above. Boston was burning. The air grew thick with smoke filtering through the ventilation system. People started tearing pieces of clothing to make masks. The Vault-Tec employees had some Radaway packets, maybe a dozen doses. They handed them out to the children first. Noble gesture, but ultimately pointless. Those doses were drops of clean water in an ocean of poison that was about to rain down on us all. Time became strange down there in the dark. Minutes felt like hours. Hours felt like seconds. Someone had a watch. one of those atomic-powered models that would keep ticking until the end of time. It read 11:15 a.m. when the second wave hit Boston. Not bombs this time, but the shockwaves from New York finally reaching us. The ceiling didn't collapse, but cracks appeared, spreading like veins, like the Earth itself was developing cancer. And fast forward, that's when people started to change. Not physically, that would come later, the ghoulification, the mutations, but mentally, you could see it in their eyes. The exact moment they realized the world above was gone. Really gone. Not damaged, not hurt, but ended. Everything they'd worked for, everyone they'd loved who wasn't in this tunnel, erased. Their homes, their photo albums, their children's drawings on refrigerators, their dogs waiting by doors that would never open again, all of it reduced to radioactive carbon in the span of a morning. Marcus was the first to start coughing blood. Small specks at first, barely visible in the dim emergency lighting. He tried to hide it, covering his mouth with that same ink-stained hand that had pulled me to safety. But I saw. We all saw. The radiation was already working on us, even down here, even through all that concrete and earth. "We can't stay," he said, voice raw. "The air down here, it's poison now. The ventilation systems are pulling in whatever's up there." The Vault Tech employees knew he was right. You could see it in how they kept checking their Pip-Boys, those wrist-mounted computers they all seemed to have. The radiation counters were clicking faster. Not screaming yet, but steady, like a metallic heartbeat getting quicker. Nobody wanted to go up. But dying slowly in the dark, breathing in radioactive ash while our organs cooked from the inside, that seemed worse somehow. The businessman with the radio stood first. "My wife worked at Mass General. If anyone survived, they'd need help." He was lying to himself, and we let him. Hope, even false hope, was the only currency left. It took us 3 hours to find a way up that wasn't blocked. 3 hours of crawling through maintenance shafts, stepping over bodies that had fled deeper only to find dead ends. The 8-year-old boy had stopped asking questions. He just stared, those huge eyes taking in things no child should see. His mother carried him even though he could walk. I think she needed to feel him breathing more than he needed to be held. The exit we found came up through a parking garage on Atlantic Avenue. The metal door was warped from heat, and it took 6 of us to force it open. When it finally gave way, we stood there, 50 souls at the threshold between the old world and the new one, afraid to take that first step. The sky was the wrong color. That's what I remember most. Not the destruction, not the bodies, the sky. It was this sick yellow-green, like a bruise on reality itself. Clouds of ash and dust rolled overhead, thick and greasy, occasionally lit from within by flashes of something. Lightning, maybe, or more bombs falling somewhere else. The sun was up there somewhere, but it was just a pale smear, like someone had tried to erase it with a dirty rag. Boston, or what had been Boston, stretched out before us. The Custom House Tower, that landmark, that had stood since 1915, was now just a skeletal frame, its clock face melted into a dully nightmare. The harbour had been vaporized, literally turned to steam, and then rushed back in as a tsunami of boiling, irradiated water. Ships were scattered inland like toys. I saw a yacht embedded in the 3rd floor of what used to be a bank. The businessman took 3 steps forward and collapsed. Not dead, just overwhelmed. His brain couldn't process what his eyes were showing him. The city he'd worked in for 20 years had become an alien landscape. Streets were rivers of glass where the asphalt had melted and rehardened. Cars were fused together in grotesque sculptures. And the shadows. God, the shadows. They were everywhere. Human shadows burned into walls, into sidewalks, into the sides of buses. Permanent photographs of the last second of people's lives. A woman reaching for something, a child mid-run, a couple holding hands, all of them now just dark stains on broken concrete, more real somehow than the actual corpses scattered around them. Because there were corpses, hundreds visible just from where we stood. Some were charred beyond recognition, human-shaped charcoal that crumbled when the wind touched them. Others looked almost normal until you got close and saw their eyes had boiled away or their skin had sloughed off like wet paper. But the worst were the ones still moving. A woman crawled out from under a collapsed storefront, her skin hanging, in sheets, leaving red trails behind her. She was trying to speak, but her throat was too damaged. Just wet, clicking sounds. One of the Vault-Tec employees had a pistol. He shot her. It was a mercy, but the boy saw it happen, and his mother finally broke, sobbing into his hair while he stared at nothing. The radiation counter on the Pip-Boy was screaming now. The Vault-Tec kid, I learned his name was Timothy. He told us we were taking 50 rads an hour just standing there. We need shelter, he said. Medicine. Radaway, Rad-X, anything. Marcus laughed and blood sprayed from his mouth. Where exactly do you think we're going to find that boy? The hospitals are gone. The pharmacies are gone. Everything is gone. But that wasn't entirely true. Some buildings still stood, damaged but not destroyed. The further from Ground Zero, which Timothy said was somewhere near Cambridge, the more intact things were. Broken but not vaporized. Poisoned but not erased. We made our way toward what had been Goodneighbor, the old neighborhood that even before the bombs had been a bit rough. Figured if anywhere would survive Judgment Day, it would be the place already used to being forgotten. The journey was maybe 8 blocks. It took us 6 hours. You had to watch every step. The ground was covered in glass shards, windows from 1,000 buildings blown out simultaneously, radioactive puddles that glowed with a sick green light, chunks of concrete that would suddenly shift and reveal crushed bodies underneath. And the dust was everywhere, getting into your lungs, your eyes, coating your throat until every breath tasted like cemetery dirt and hot metal. We found other survivors along the way. They came crawling out of basements, subway entrances, anywhere they'd found cover. Most were already showing radiation sickness, hair falling out in clumps, vomiting blood, skin developing these raised welts that would later become the ghoul's trademark. Some joined our group. Others just sat there, broken, waiting to die. Old man in a hospital gown wandered past us, completely naked except for the gown, humming The Ink Spots like nothing had happened. His skin was already starting that distinctive ghoul transformation, leathery, tightening, pulling away from the muscle. He'd probably taken 1,000 rads in the first minutes. Should have been dead. Some people, we'd learn later, had a genetic quirk that let them survive the radiation. Survive, but not remain human. He'd be wandering the Commonwealth for centuries, that song still on what was left of his lips. We found a relatively intact warehouse, part of the old Shamrock tap houses. Storage facility. The beer was boiled, the food was ash, but the walls were thick and the radiation was slightly lower inside. Maybe 20 rads an hour instead of 50. We barricaded ourselves in. That's when the real dynamics of the new world started. 50 strangers, traumatized, dying slowly, with limited resources. The businessman, his name was Richardson, he tried to establish some kind of order. We need to ration what we find, work together, help each other. Someone laughed. I think it was one of the other tunnel survivors, a young woman in what had been a waitress uniform. Help each other. My kids are dead. My husband is dead. Everyone I've ever loved is dead. What exactly are we helping each other do? Die slower? The Vault-Tec employees huddled together, whispering. They had those Radaway packets, remember? And Pip-Boys with maps, radiation counters, even some basic medical supplies. In the old world, they'd been corporate drones. In this new one, they were kings. People started looking at them differently, calculating. Night fell, though you could barely tell the difference. The sky went from yellow-green to a deep, poisonous orange. Fires were burning all over the city, gas mains, chemical plants, anything flammable catching light from the heat. The Charles River was literally on fire, all the pollutants and oil on its surface creating a river of flame that would burn for weeks. We could hear things moving outside, not people. People made deliberate sounds. These were different, skittering, clicking. The bombs hadn't just killed, they'd changed things. Insects grown large from the radiation, pets turned feral and wrong, and worse things that had crawled out of whatever hellish laboratories and military bases had been cracked open. Someone started pounding on our barricaded door around midnight. "Let me in," they screamed. "Please, God, let me in, they're coming." We didn't open it. We couldn't risk it. The pounding continued for 10 minutes, then stopped. Then we heard the wet sounds, tearing, cracking. Something was eating whoever had been outside. When it was done, we heard it sniff around our door, testing, probing, before moving on. The boy asked his mother what the sound was. She told him it was just the wind. He didn't believe her, but he pretended to, which was somehow worse. Children adapting to horror that quickly. That told you everything about what our world had become. By morning, or what we assumed was morning, 5 more of our group were showing advanced radiation sickness. Marcus was worst. His hair was gone, his gums bleeding constantly, his skin starting to tighten and crack. But he was still lucid, still himself, which made it horrible. "I can feel it," he told me, voice barely a whisper. "The radiation. It's not killing me. It's changing me. I can feel my DNA unraveling and reknitting into something else." He was becoming a ghoul. We didn't have a word for it yet, but we could see it happening. The transformation was agony, every nerve ending firing at once as his body tried to die, and refused to. Some people's minds broke from the pain. They became feral, animal, attacking anything that moved. Marcus held on, but you could see the effort in his eyes. The constant battle to remain human while his body became something else. Timothy, the Vault-Tec kid, finally told us the truth. They'd known the war was coming. Not the exact day, but soon. Vault-Tec had been preparing for years. The vaults, the experiments, all of it. "Experiments?" Richardson asked. Timothy nodded, unable to meet our eyes. Each vault was different, testing different things. Psychological responses, genetic modifications, social structures. Vault 111 was testing cryogenic preservation. Vault 81 was supposed to be disease research. Others were worse, much worse. The waitress grabbed him by the collar. You all knew this was coming, and you let us die." "I was just an engineer," Timothy sobbed. "I maintained the door mechanisms. I didn't know about the experiments until..." She hit him, hard, broke his nose. Nobody stopped her. The other Vault-Tec, employees backed away, hands on their weapons. And just like that, we weren't a group of survivors anymore. We were factions. Those with resources and those without. Those changing and those still human. Those with hope and those who'd already given up. Outside, Boston continued to burn. The radiation storms were starting. Those crackling green nightmares. That would become a permanent feature of the Commonwealth. Each one dumped more rads, more poison, more change onto an already dying world. The first murder happened on day 4. Richardson had been trying to maintain some pretense of civilization, dividing up the few cans of food we'd found in the warehouse. The radiation had spoiled most of it, but some sealed containers were still good. Barely. Each person was supposed to get an equal share, but Timothy and the other Vault-Tec employees had been sneaking extra rations. We all knew it. They had the Radaway, the weapons, the Pip-Boys that could detect safer areas. They thought that made them special. Above the rest of us, it was the waitress who did it. Sarah, I finally learned her name right before she became a killer. Timothy went outside to relieve himself, and she followed. We heard the struggle, the wet gasp, then nothing. She came back with his Pip-Boy and his blood under her fingernails. "He fell," she said flatly. "Radiation got him." Shame about that. Nobody challenged her. We all wanted what Timothy had. The Pip-Boy showed radiation levels, had maps, could even pick up distress signals. In this new world, information was life. And Sarah had just shown us the new rule: take what you need to survive. The other Vault-Tec employees didn't last the night. One by one, they wandered off or succumbed to radiation. Their supplies were distributed among the strongest. The businessman Richardson tried to stop it, tried to maintain order. Someone, I never saw who, slit his throat while he slept. He bled out silently, his radio still clutched in his dead hands, static whispering from its speakers like the ghost of the old world. By the end of the first week, there were only 20 of us left. The boy and his mother had died together, holding each other. The radiation had been too much for their smaller bodies. We burned them outside, and the smoke was green. Everything was green now. The rain, when it came, was green and thick, like syrup, and it burned wherever it touched. Marcus was fully ghoulified by then. His transformation was complete. Skin like leather, eyes milky but somehow still seeing, his voice a rasp that sounded like grinding stone. But he was still Marcus. Still remembered selling newspapers. Still remembered my name. That made him lucky. Half the ghouls went feral immediately, their minds unable to cope with the change. They became animals, hunting in packs, eating anything, anyone they could catch. You should leave, he told me one night. Find other survivors. Build something. Build what? I asked. With what? For who? He pointed out the window to where fires still burned on the horizon. Someone survived out there. Someone always survives. And they're going to need to know what happened here. What we did to ourselves. Sarah had become our leader by then, through violence and fear. She'd found more weapons, organized raids on other survivor camps. Yes, there were others. Small groups huddled in basements and ruins, just trying to live another day. Sarah's philosophy was simple. Take from them before they take from you. I watched her execute a family who'd been hiding in a bank vault. They had water, clean water they'd stored before the bombs. She shot the father first, then the mother. Let the children run. They'll die slower out there, she said. Save us the bullets. That's when I understood what we were becoming. Not survivors, not rebuilders, raiders, the first generation of them. The bombs hadn't just destroyed civilization. They'd revealed what we really were underneath. Animals pretending to be something more. And when the pretense was stripped away, when law and order became just words, we defaulted to our base nature. But there were others who chose differently. I met them when I finally left Sarah's group, slipping away one night while she was entertaining herself with one of her lieutenants. They called themselves the Commonwealth Provisional Government, grandiose name for 30 people living in a collapsed subway station. But they were trying, sharing resources, caring for the sick, teaching children, the few who were left, to read and write. Their leader was a woman named Angela, a former Boston City Councilwoman. Half her face was melted from the initial flash, but her mind was sharp. We can't let them win, she told me. Who? The ones who dropped the bombs, Vault-Tec, the government, China, all of them. They wanted to destroy the world. Fine. But we're going to build it back, better, even if it takes centuries. It was noble, it was hopeful, it was doomed. Sarah's raiders hit them 2 weeks later. I wasn't there, but I heard about it. They didn't just kill them, they made examples of them. Bodies hung from lampposts, messages carved into skin. Hope dies here. The Commonwealth Provisional Government lasted exactly 23 days. The months that followed blur together. Radiation storms became common. The first snows were black and killed anything they touched. The water sources were all contaminated. We learned to identify which corpses were fresh enough to drink blood from. We learned which mutations were edible and which would kill you faster than starvation. I saw my first super mutant 3 months after the bombs. It had been a person once, but the FEV, the forced evolutionary virus that had leaked from some military base, had transformed it into something else. 10 feet tall, muscles like steel cables, skin the color of spoiled meat. It was wearing the remnants of a soldier's uniform, dog tag still around its neck. Thompson, J. Serial, number 445890912. It didn't remember being Thompson. Didn't remember being human. It just knew hunger and rage. It ate 7 people before someone finally brought it down with a shopping cart full of grenades. Even dying, it took 5 hours to stop moving. We burned the body, and the smoke made everyone who breathed it sick for days. The vault started, opening around month 6. Not fully, just scouts checking the surface. We killed the first ones we saw, thinking they were vault tech, thinking they were responsible. But they were just people. Families who'd won a lottery they didn't understand. Spent months underground in experiments they didn't consent to. Vault 111 scouts told us about the cryogenic freezing. How they'd been told it was decontamination, then frozen for who knows how long. Some of their pods had failed. They'd found their neighbors, their friends, dead and freezer burned in their steel coffins. Vault 81 was worse. Disease experiments, they said. Watching people injected with plagues, studying how they died. The overseer had rebelled, sealed off the science section, but not before half the vault had been infected with God knows what. And there were more, always more. Each vault a petri dish, each survivor a data point in some sick experiment that no one would ever read the results of. Because the scientists were dead, the government was dead. Vault-Tech's executives were probably in some luxury bunker that had failed like everything else. All that suffering for nothing. Data that would rot in terminals no one could access. The first Brotherhood of Steel patrol I saw was 8 months after the bombs. Power armor, walking tanks that had somehow survived. They came from the west, they said, from Lost Hills. Military survivors trying to preserve technology to keep. The weapons that had destroyed the world from destroying what was left. Sarah tried to raid them. I watched from a distance as her 30 raiders attacked 3 Brotherhood knights. The laser rifles cut through human flesh like it wasn't there. The miniguns turned bodies into red mist. When it was over, the Brotherhood didn't even check the corpses. Just continued their patrol, stepping over the dead like they were rubble. That's when I learned the new hierarchy. At the bottom, regular humans, dying of radiation and starvation. Above them, ghouls, immune to radiation but hunted and feared. Then raiders and settlers, fighting over scraps. Super mutants, carving out their territories. And at the top, anyone with pre-war military technology. The Brotherhood. Later, the Enclave. Eventually, the Institute, though we didn't know about them yet. I became a ghoul myself around year 2. Felt it coming for weeks. The skin tightening, the hair falling out, the constant taste of copper in my mouth. Marcus found me when the transformation was at its worst, convulsing in an abandoned pharmacy, my body trying to die and failing. "Don't fight it," he said, holding me down as my muscles spasmed. "The ones who fight go feral. Accept it. Let it happen." 3 days of agony. 3 days of every cell in my body screaming as radiation rewrote my DNA. But I came through with my mind intact. Looking in a broken mirror, I didn't recognize the face staring back. Leather skin, milky eyes, patches where you could see muscle through gaps in what used to be my cheek. But I could survive now. Radiation healed me instead of killing me. I didn't need clean water, didn't need much food. I could walk through radiation storms that would kill a normal human in seconds. I was perfectly adapted for this new world. All it cost was my humanity. The years started blending together. 5 years, 10, 20. Settlements rose and fell. The Minutemen formed, fell apart, reformed, fell apart again. The railroad started, helping synths when the Institute finally revealed themselves by replacing people with synthetic doubles. The Brotherhood came and went, always taking technology, never sharing it. I watched Boston, the Commonwealth they called it now, try to rebuild. Diamond City in the old baseball stadium. Good Neighbor for the outcasts, Bunker Hill for traders, little pockets of civilization in an ocean of chaos. Each one an island, suspicious of outsiders, barely surviving. But here's the truth nobody wants to admit. We adapted. Humans always do. The children born after the bombs didn't know what they'd lost. To them, the radiation storms were normal. The super mutants were normal. Drinking irradiated water and checking every corpse for caps. The new currency was just life. They developed resistances, mutations that let them survive. Some could sense radiation, others could eat foods that would have killed their parents. Evolution in fast forward, selecting for those who could live in hell, and we taught them our sins. The new generation learned to shoot before they could read, if they learned to read at all. They learned that strangers were threats, that showing weakness meant death, that the strong took from the weak. We passed down our trauma like our inheritance, ensuring that even if the radiation faded, even if the world healed, the scars would remain in how we treated each other. I write this now, 200 years after the bombs, in a terminal that barely works, in a building that should have collapsed decades ago. I'm one of the last who remembers the moment it happened. The last who can tell you what we were in those first days, weeks, months. We weren't heroes. We weren't survivors building back better. We were scared, desperate animals who did terrible things to live another day. We became raiders, cannibals, murderers. We sold out our neighbors for a can of food. We left children to die because they would slow us down. But some of us, just a few, tried to be more. Tried to preserve something. Knowledge, history, human decency. They mostly died badly, but they died as people, not animals. If you're reading this, if civilization has somehow returned, remember us honestly. Not as heroes or villains, but as what we were. Ordinary people faced with the end of everything, who mostly failed to rise to the occasion. Learn from our failures. Be better than we were. And if you're reading this and the world is still burning, still radiation and raiders and death, then know this. It was like this from the very beginning. We made this world through our choices in those first crucial moments. Every atrocity normalized, every kindness punished, every hope crushed. We chose that. The bombs didn't destroy the world. They just gave us permission to destroy ourselves.